During our senior year, the dean announced a crackdown on student dating, and every head in the classroom immediately turned to look at me and the most popular girl in school. It was only because we were universally acknowledged as a match made in heaven. We were childhood sweethearts. At 7, we made a pact to get married. At 14, I gave her a love letter. At 16, she confessed her feelings to me. At 18, we promised we'd get into the same university. To make sure she could keep dating me, Chloe stormed into the dean's office that very day. No one knew what they discussed, but the next day, everyone saw the usually distant Chloe suddenly start looking after the new transfer student, Liam Carter. At first, it was just normal tutoring and showing him around campus, but slowly, things started to feel off. Liam mentioned wanting a cake from that popular bakery across town with the ridiculously long lines, so Chloe skipped our evening study hall to go get it for him. Liam posted on Facebook that he was feeling down, and Chloe stayed on the phone with him the entire night. Once, when Liam had a stomachache, Chloe actually snuck off campus to buy him medicine. I got angry and argued with her, starting to bring up breaking up time and time again. The first time I suggested we break up, it was over the phone. It was pouring rain that night, and she ran to my apartment building, standing outside completely drenched for the entire night, calling my name over and over in a hoarse voice, begging for my forgiveness. The second time, she skipped a whole day of classes to wait for me in my homeroom, handing me a thick letter, the handwriting messy but the words full of genuine emotion, humbly begging me to take her back. But as it happened more often, she seemed to have finally figured me out. She knew I couldn't leave her, and so, she became more and more careless with my feelings. Until the 99th time, at the party after our final exams, Liam said he wanted some watermelon. Chloe personally carved out the sweet, seedless heart of the melon and gave it to him, so naturally that she completely forgot I was standing right there. All the disappointment and pain that had been building up for so long finally broke through. I stared at that slice of bright red watermelon, my voice terrifyingly calm. "Chloe, let's break up." Chloe froze for a second, then casually glanced up at me, her tone tinged with annoyance. I didn't say another word. I just got up and walked out of the room. The first thing I did when I got home was open my laptop and, without a second thought, change my top choice on my college application from Harvard, the school Chloe and I had promised to attend together, to NYU, 1,000 miles away. Then I started gathering everything that had to do with Chloe, stuffing it all into a giant cardboard box. The next day, I carried that heavy box over to Chloe's house. In her spacious living room, Chloe and Liam were sitting side by side on a plush rug, playing the latest video game. They were sitting close together, and Chloe would occasionally let out an excited gasp or a light laugh. "Liam, you're amazing. I've been stuck on this level for ages." My eyes were immediately drawn to the ill-fitting black t-shirt Liam was wearing. It was a limited edition shirt I had spent days hunting down for her birthday last year. When she received it, she had hugged me, overjoyed, and whispered in my ear, "A gift from Ethan. I'm going to wear it every day." Apparently, her idea of wearing it every day included casually lending it to another guy. Liam seemed to sense me looking. He turned, and upon seeing me with the box, a deceptively innocent smile spread across his face. "Ethan, you're here." Chloe invited me over to play games, and she even cooked me pasta from scratch. I was so clumsy though, I spilled juice on myself, so she let me borrow her shirt. "You don't mind, do you?" Chloe just glanced up at me lazily. "What are you doing here?" I thought we broke up. Seeing how completely unbothered she was, I felt a bitter wave of self-pity wash over me. She had tested my boundaries again and again, and my repeated forgiveness had only made her more reckless. But she didn't know that even the strongest back can be broken by the final straw. This 99th time, I was truly done with her. I took a deep breath, forcing down the lump in my throat. "It's because we broke up that I'm here. I wanted to give you your things back." Chloe seemed irritated. "You could have just thrown that stuff out. You didn't need to bring it all the way over here." "Fine." Without any hesitation, I walked over to the large trash can in the corner and dropped the entire box of memories inside. I turned to leave. "Wait," Chloe called out. "Take your stuff that's here too." She expected me to be hurt by that, to get teary-eyed and ask her what she meant. Then she would have smoothly suggested we stop fighting, and everything would go back to normal. But I just turned around silently and began collecting my things from the house I had once considered a second home, gathering my traces as if they were just insignificant trash. All the while, Chloe and Liam started a new round of their game. During a pause in the game, Liam said he was thirsty and, with complete ease, took a drink from Chloe's water bottle. Chloe, a notorious germaphobe who used to refuse to even sip my drink, just glanced at him and said nothing. Then Liam complained he was hungry and wanted those famous dumplings from that old place in Chinatown. Without a word, Chloe immediately stood up, grabbed her car keys, and headed out the door. I saw it all, but strangely, my heart no longer ached. There was only a cold numbness. I carried the new box of my things upstairs to get the last few items from Chloe's room. As soon as I pushed open her bedroom door, a figure blocked my path. It was Liam. His face was a mask of open provocation and triumph. "You already broke up with Chloe. Why are you still hanging around trying to get attention?" I didn't want to argue with him. My voice was flat. "I'm just getting my things so we can have a clean break." "A clean break?" Liam scoffed. "You think playing hard to get is going to make Chloe look at you twice? You always threaten to break up just because you know she'll come running back to you. What can you do besides cling to her? I'm telling you, everything you love, I'm going to take. You copied her college choice so you could keep following her, right? Well, it doesn't matter. I got into Harvard too. I'm going to take her from you, piece by piece, and you're going to watch as you lose to me." I couldn't be bothered with his insane rambling and tried to walk around him with my box. But Liam wouldn't let go. He grabbed my arm, his words turning vicious. "Ethan, have some self-respect. You're pathetic when you grovel like this. No wonder Chloe is sick of you. I guess your mother never taught you any better. Raising a..." The sound of a slap echoed. I couldn't take it anymore. I raised my hand and slapped him hard across the face. I could tolerate being insulted, but I would never let anyone disrespect my parents. Liam stared at me in disbelief, his face contorting with rage as he raised his hand to strike back. Just then, we heard the front door open downstairs, followed by footsteps. A flicker of cunning crossed Liam's eyes. He suddenly grabbed my arm, let out a yell, and pulled me with him as he threw himself down the stairs. We both tumbled down the staircase, landing in a heap on the floor below. My whole body ached as if my bones were broken. I had hit my head on the edge of a step, and I could feel warm blood trickling down my forehead. Liam was hurt too, but he scrambled up first, clutching his face to perfectly display the red handprint from my slap. He looked up with wide, tearful eyes. "Chloe, Ethan, he just attacked me. He hit me, and then he pushed me down the stairs. It hurts so much." Chloe's expression turned to ice. She rushed over, glanced at the whimpering Liam, and then fixed her icy glare on me as I tried to get to my feet. Her voice was frigid. "Ethan, are you insane? This is my house. What gives you the right to attack my guest?" I fought through the pain and dizziness trying to explain. "He insulted my parents. I only..." "Enough!" Chloe cut me off, her eyes filled with disappointment and irritation. "I don't want to hear your excuses. Mrs. Davis, please show him out." I watched as Chloe turned without a moment's hesitation, gently helping Liam to the sofa. She took out the first aid kit and began to tenderly clean his scrapes, treating him as if he were made of glass. In that moment, it felt like a knife was being twisted in my chest, the pain so sharp I could hardly breathe. She used to treat me with that same care. All my explanations and feelings of injustice were caught in my throat, turning into cold, hard despair. I didn't say another word. I just dragged my aching, battered body out the door. I went to the hospital by myself. The diagnosis was a mild concussion and multiple bruises. The doctor suggested I stay overnight for observation. While I was in the hospital, Liam sent me a stream of taunting iMessages, complete with photos and videos of Chloe doting on him. I looked at them all with a blank face and didn't reply to a single one. When your heart is dead, taunts like that can't hurt you anymore. After I got out, our class organized a graduation party. I didn't want to go, but my friends convinced me. The moment I walked into the restaurant, I saw Chloe and Liam sitting together, practically inseparable. Liam was smiling as he fed her a piece of fruit, and she accepted it. My classmates looked awkward when they saw me. They gathered around and asked quietly, "What's going on? Did you and Chloe have another fight?" I calmly shook my head. My voice wasn't loud, but it was clear. "We didn't fight. We broke up." "What? Broke up?" Everyone was stunned. "Why? Chloe was so good to you. You guys were the couple everyone thought would be together forever. How could you break up right before graduation?" Listening to them list all the ways Chloe used to be good to me felt like my heart was soaking in acid. She used to be so good to me, so good that I thought I would spend the rest of my life with her. But that's exactly what made her later coldness and favoritism so incredibly cruel. I was quiet for a moment before saying softly, "We just weren't right for each other. No one is indispensable. Besides," I glanced over at Chloe pouring a drink for Liam. "She seems pretty happy with him, doesn't she?" Chloe happened to overhear me. She frowned and shot me a complicated look. For the rest of the evening, as if to spite me, she doubled down on her affection for Liam. She expected me to get jealous and angry, maybe even storm over and interrupt them like I used to, but I just sat quietly in the corner, treating her as if she were a complete stranger. This total indifference from me seemed to spark an unfamiliar panic in her. She instinctively started to walk toward me, but Liam grabbed her arm. Liam leaned in and whispered something in her ear. Chloe hesitated, her brow furrowed, but she ultimately sat back down. Soon, someone suggested a game of truth or dare. A few rounds in, Liam lost. His dare was to kiss the prettiest girl in the room for 3 minutes. Every eye in the room immediately fell on Chloe. Liam, however, looked directly at me with a challenging glint in his eye as he walked over to her. A collective gasp went through the room. Someone whispered, "This is a bad idea. Ethan's right here." But Liam deliberately looked over at me in the corner and asked in a loud, theatrical voice, "Ethan, since you and Chloe are broken up, you won't mind if we kiss for a game, right?" In an instant, every gaze in the room was on me like a spotlight, including Chloe's. Her stare was intense, carrying a heavy, unspoken pressure, as if she was waiting to see what I would do. I looked down, and my voice was barely a whisper, but it carried clearly through the silent room. "It really has nothing to do with me." That one sentence drew a clear line between us. The color drained from Chloe's face, replaced by a look of fury. She let out a sharp, cold laugh, pulled Liam towards her, and kissed him hard as everyone gasped. The room filled with stifled gasps and then fell completely silent. The two of them kissed passionately under the dim lights. I dug my nails into my palm, using every ounce of my strength to fight back the wave of anguish and despair that threatened to consume me. After what felt like an eternity, the long kiss finally ended. One of Liam's friends deliberately shouted, "So, Chloe, how was it? Kissing our boy Liam must be way better than kissing some other people, right?" Chloe's eyes flickered over to my pale face, a cold smile playing on her lips. Her voice was quiet, but her words were sharp and cruel. "There's no comparison. Liam wins, hands down." Liam's face was practically glowing with triumph. They played a few more rounds and Liam lost again. This time, the dare was to sit on a girl's lap and complete a task. Without a moment's hesitation, Liam's eyes went straight to Chloe. I couldn't stand it anymore. I muttered, "I'll be right back," to my friend beside me and quickly escaped the suffocating room. I hid in the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face over and over, but tears streamed down, mixing with the water. After a long while, I finally managed to pull myself together and decided to just go home. As I rounded the corner in the hallway, I heard familiar voices coming from the balcony. It was Chloe and her closest friends. "Chloe, wasn't that a little too much back there?" Ethan looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Aren't you going to go smooth things over?" "Smooth things over?" It was Chloe's voice, cold and dismissive. "So he can just threaten to break up with me again in a few days? It's so annoying." "That's true. You spoiled him too much before, letting him use breaking up as a weapon. This is a good chance to teach him a lesson. Once we're at Harvard, he won't know anyone. He'll definitely come crawling back to you. Then you can just give him an easy way out and get back together. After this, he'll never dare threaten you with a breakup again." "Sounds good." Standing outside, I felt the blood freeze in my veins. So, in her eyes, all the times I broke up with her out of hurt and disappointment were just manipulative threats. And her idea of teaching me a lesson was to humiliate me by kissing another guy in front of all our friends. I turned and walked away without a sound. The summer night air felt freezing, and I couldn't stop shivering. On the way home, the past played over and over in my head like a silent movie. In a daze, I found myself almost home. I saw a mail carrier standing by the mailboxes. It looked like the college acceptance letters were here. I took a deep breath and was about to walk over when I saw a familiar, slender figure standing in front of him. It was Chloe. She was holding an envelope with the NYU logo clearly visible on it, and she was about to tear it open. My heart seized. On pure instinct, I lunged forward and snatched the letter out of her hand. "What are you doing?" Chloe's hand was still frozen in the air, stunned by my reaction. Then her expression turned cold. "The mailman said you weren't home. You still have me listed as your emergency contact, so he had me sign for it." I looked down, hiding the storm of emotions in my eyes. "The emergency contact. I forgot to change it. I'll take care of it." I didn't look at her again as I quickly signed my name. From this moment on, our paths would never cross again. After signing, I turned to go inside, but I heard Chloe ask the mail carrier, "Is that the only one? There isn't one for me?" We applied to the same school, so they should have arrived together. The mail carrier confirmed, "Yes, ma'am, just this one." Chloe's frown deepened. She called out to me as I started to walk away. Ethan, open it. Maybe my letter got put in your envelope by mistake. I didn't turn around, but my voice was firm. It's not in here. My certainty seemed to surprise her, and a flicker of unease crossed her face. She pressed on. How can you be so sure? I took a deep breath, about to finally tell her the decision I had made, but her phone suddenly started ringing. It was Liam. The moment she answered, Liam's panicked voice came through the speaker. Chloe, where are you? I'm scared. I think someone's following me. The color drained from Chloe's face. All her attention snapped to the phone, her voice filled with a familiar, urgent concern I hadn't heard in a long time. Don't be scared. Stay right where you are, don't move. Send me your location. I'm on my way. She didn't even spare me another glance, nor did she hear the quiet words that carried the weight of 1,000 pounds. Because I changed my application. We're not going to the same school. She just turned and sprinted towards her car. The roar of her engine quickly faded away. I watched her car disappear down the street, and the last ripple of emotion in my heart finally stilled. In the days that followed, I quietly started packing for my move. The day I went back to school to get my transcripts, I saw Chloe and Liam by the main bulletin board. She had her arm linked through his, striking cute poses and smiling brightly for a selfie. I watched from a distance, and for a moment, I was lost in a memory of how that used to be us. On this very campus, we had walked hand in hand down every tree-lined path. Those memories, once so beautiful they felt unreal, now seemed like a distant, hazy dream. I avoided them and headed toward the school's memorial garden. There was an old oak tree there, where our names had once been carved into the trunk. She had carved them herself our freshman year, carefully, stroke by stroke with a pocket knife, saying it was to etch us into each other's lives forever. Now I took out my house key and found our names, scraping them away, sliver by sliver. Just as I finished and was about to leave, I heard Liam's cheerful voice behind me. Chloe, come look. I heard that if you carve your names on a tree in this grove, you'll have a bright future together. Should we do one? I didn't turn around, but I could easily imagine Chloe nodding yes. Sure enough, I heard her cool voice reply, okay. Then came the soft scratching sound of a knife against bark. They chose a tree right next to the one where our names used to be. I kept my back to them the whole time, silent. When I was done, I turned and walked away. I had just reached the edge of the campus pond when Liam caught up to me. Ethan, wait, he called out, holding up a small button. You dropped this. I recognized it as one that had just fallen off my jacket and reached for it. But Liam pulled his hand back, a smirk on his face. Ethan, from now on, I'm the only one who will be by Chloe's side. You've lost the right to stand with her. I'm going to prove to you that I'm 1,000 times more important to her than you ever were. I had no interest in a pointless argument. I just wanted my button back so I could leave. Give it to me. My complete dismissal of him seemed to infuriate him. He grabbed my wrist, his voice rising in anger. Stop acting so high and mighty. Don't think you're special just because you've known her forever. Haven't you heard that the new flame always burns brighter than the old one? Chloe and I are meant to be. You're just going to be an insignificant footnote in her past. I tried to pull my arm away, but he held on tight. We struggled by the edge of the pond, and in the heat of the moment, one of us slipped. 2 successive splashes echoed as we both fell into the water. I know how to swim, but the shock of the cold water made my calf cramp up violently. I couldn't move my leg, and my body began to sink. Water filled my nose and throat, and a frantic sense of suffocation took over. Just as I was starting to lose hope, I saw Chloe on the bank dive into the water without a second's hesitation. In that instant, the tiny flame of hope that was nearly extinguished inside me flickered back to life. But in the next second, Chloe swam straight past me, toward Liam, and started pulling him to the shore. She never once looked back at me. She helped Liam onto the bank. He grabbed her arm and said loudly, Chloe, Ethan, he's still in the water. Chloe turned and looked at me as I struggled to stay afloat, about to go under. Her voice carried across the water, shattering my last shred of hope. We broke up. Whether he lives or dies has nothing to do with me. With that, she helped the shaken Liam to his feet and they walked away, leaving me in the cold water to slowly lose my strength. When I woke up, I was staring at the white ceiling of a hospital room. A few of my friends were gathered around my bed. They all looked relieved. Ethan, you're awake. Thank God. You scared us to death. Apparently, a student had been walking by the pond and saw me unconscious near the edge. They called for help, and I was pulled out and brought to the hospital. We tried calling your mom, but she didn't pick up, so we called Chloe, one of them explained awkwardly. Another friend added, his voice full of disbelief and anger. We told her you were in the hospital and that she should come, but she said you two were broken up and that it had nothing to do with her. I listened quietly, my face a complete blank. I pushed myself up into a sitting position and managed a reassuring smile for my friends. Chloe's right, we're completely broken up. We won't be in contact anymore. They all exchanged confused glances, still not believing it. How is that possible? Weren't you guys supposed to go to Harvard together? I looked down. She and Liam are going to Harvard, I said quietly. I'm going to. Before I could finish my sentence, the door to my room flew open and my parents rushed in, their faces etched with worry. Ethan, are you okay? How on earth did you fall in the pond? You scared me half to death. My parents hovered over me, anxiously asking about my condition while I tried to reassure them. Once they confirmed I was okay, they handled my discharge paperwork. For the next week, I rested at home. I also got in touch with an upperclassman at NYU through the incoming freshman Facebook group to learn more about the school, and I booked my flight to New York. My parents watched me bustling around, and after hesitating several times, my dad finally spoke up. Ethan, the Andersons are throwing a send-off party for Chloe. They invited our family. We were wondering. I paused my packing for a moment, then nodded calmly. Okay, I'll go. On the day of the party, my parents and I arrived on time with a gift. When I saw Chloe, we just gave each other a brief nod. Not a word was exchanged. Our parents saw the exchange and knew immediately that we were fighting again. Chloe's father took my hand, smiling to ease the tension. Ethan, good to see you. Come on in. Chloe can be stubborn, but you two are about to head off to college together. You need to look out for each other, not hold grudges. Chloe's mother patted her on the shoulder. You're a year older than Ethan, you should be the mature one. Chloe stood there with a cold expression, silent, her eyes not even glancing in my direction. I took a quiet breath, about to tell them that we had broken up for good, when there was a sudden stir at the door. Liam walked in, looking sharp and carrying a huge bouquet of sunflowers. He greeted Chloe's parents politely. Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, hello? Chloe, congratulations. The moment Chloe saw Liam, her cold expression melted, and her eyes softened. Without even waiting for her parents to reply, she said to Liam naturally, You made it, come on in. And just like that, she led him into the party, leaving me and my parents standing awkwardly by the door. The smiles on Mr. and Mrs. Anderson's faces became strained and awkward as they quickly ushered us inside. Throughout the entire party, my parents' eyes were glued to Chloe and Liam. They watched as Chloe carefully served him food, discreetly intercepted people trying to get him to drink too much, and leaned in to whisper intimately with him. My parents' expressions slowly shifted from confusion to understanding, and finally, to a deep, painful sympathy for me. On my way to the restroom, my mom pulled me aside. Tell me the truth, Ethan, she whispered. What's going on with you and Chloe? Is she just trying to make you jealous with that boy? You two have known each other your whole lives. Don't let a little fight ruin things. I thought about all our breakups and makeups over the years, how every brief reconciliation was always followed by even more blatant favoritism and pain from her. I shook my head, my voice weary but firm. I'm not holding a grudge, Mom. I'm really, truly done with her. I took a deep breath and finally told them the decision I had been hiding. I changed my application. I'm not going to Harvard. I'm going to NYU. My parents stared at me, shocked into silence. NYU? That was on the opposite side of the country from Harvard. My parents were about to say something when a series of screams and a tremendous crash erupted from the center of the room. The massive crystal chandelier from the ceiling was falling, and standing directly beneath it were Chloe and Liam, laughing together. In that split second, Chloe acted on pure instinct, shoving Liam out of the way with all her might. The heavy fixture crashed down onto her back, sending shards of crystal flying. Chloe let out a choked cry as blood instantly started to pour from her head and back. She staggered for a moment before collapsing to the floor, unconscious. The room exploded into chaos, a mess of screams, cries, and frantic shouts. The paramedics arrived quickly and rushed a blood-soaked, unconscious Chloe to the hospital. My parents pulled me along with them, my face as white as a sheet. The light above the operating room door stayed on for a long time. Finally, a doctor came out and announced that the surgery was a success and she was out of danger. Everyone breathed a collective sigh of relief. My parents looked at my dazed expression, sighed, and without a word, took me home. The car was silent on the ride home. After a long while, my mom finally spoke again, her voice soft. Ethan, are you really sure about this? About leaving Chloe? I watched the city lights blur past the window and gave a slow, tired smile that was filled with relief. I'm sure, Mom, you saw it tonight. The person she cares about isn't me anymore. My parents looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror, at my calm but pale face, and their hearts ached for me. They were quiet for a long time, as if coming to a silent agreement. My dad finally spoke. Since you've made your decision, your mother and I will support you. As it happens, I've been planning to expand the business to the East Coast. So we'll just move the whole family. The company, our home, everything. That way we can be close by while you're at school. I was stunned. Seeing the unconditional support and love in their eyes, my own eyes started to burn. I nodded hard, a lump forming in my throat. Okay. It seemed Chloe and I were truly never going to see each other again. Over the next 2 weeks, our family quietly prepared to move. On the day we were set to leave, we went to the Andersons' house with a gift to say our goodbyes. When they heard our whole family was moving and I once again stated, firmly and finally, that Chloe and I were completely over, Mr. and Mrs. Anderson were shocked and full of regret. We've always thought of you as our son-in-law. Chloe is just confused right now, Mrs. Anderson said, holding my hand, her eyes welling up. I just shook my head calmly, my voice gentle but distant. Mrs. Anderson, we were just kids. It doesn't count. We'll both find people who are better for us. They tried to persuade me to stay, but seeing I was resolute, they could only sigh in resignation. Seeing it was getting late, Mr. Anderson took out his phone. I'll call Chloe and tell her to come home and see you off. That girl. The moment she started feeling better, she's been out all day. The phone rang for a long time before she picked up. Mr. Anderson spoke urgently. Chloe, where are you? You need to come home. Ethan is leaving for college today. You should come to the airport to see him off. Chloe cut him off. I'm going with Liam tomorrow. If he's leaving, he can leave on his own. I don't have time to see him off. I'm hanging up. Before her father could say another word, the line went dead. Mr. Anderson stood there holding the phone, his face a mixture of anger and embarrassment. I stepped forward and gently touched his arm. Mr. Anderson, it's okay. Our flight is soon. Thank you for the thought. If she's busy, it's fine. It's not a big deal. My parents also hurried over to smooth things over. Finally, in a cloud of awkwardness and regret, our family said goodbye to the Andersons. As the plane climbed into the sky, I looked out the window, watching the city I had called home for 18 years shrink below me until it was swallowed by the clouds. I felt a strange sense of peace. Goodbye forever, Chloe. Meanwhile, Chloe went with Liam to Harvard for freshman orientation, just as she'd planned. She helped him with his luggage and got him settled into his dorm, taking care of everything. Chloe, all done? Let's go get something to eat, Liam said with a smile once he was unpacked. I'm tired. I think I'll just go back and rest, Chloe replied, her voice flat. For some reason, ever since that phone call from her father, she had felt a strange, nagging sense of unease. Oh, okay, Liam said, a little disappointed, but he didn't push it. Chloe walked out of the men's dorm, the afternoon sun glaring in her eyes. She stood in the shade of a tree and, without thinking, pulled out her phone and opened our iMessage conversation, which had been silent for weeks. We'd been giving each other the silent treatment for so long. Surely his anger had cooled by now. This time, she had given me the cold shoulder for weeks, even kissed Liam right in front of me. The lesson should have been more than enough. It was time to give him an out, to suggest they get back together. She imagined the look on my face when I saw her, a mixture of hurt and surprised relief, and a faint, knowing smile touched her lips. She was in control. After this, he would never dare to threaten her with a breakup again. The only problem was, she didn't know which dorm I was in. With that thought, Chloe put her phone away and headed straight for the freshman registration desk. Hi, can you look up which dorm Ethan Miller from the dance program is in? The student worker typed for a moment, then looked up with a confused expression. Sorry, I'm not finding an Ethan Miller on the freshman roster. The faint smile on Chloe's face vanished. She frowned. That's impossible. He's definitely in this year's class. Can you please check again? The student checked the list again, even pulling up the master roster for the entire university, before shaking his head firmly. He's definitely not here. I checked every department, not just dance. There's no one by that name. A powerful wave of anxiety gripped Chloe's heart. She suddenly remembered how I had snatched the letter from her, remembered the words I'd said that she hadn't quite heard over Liam's phone call. A ridiculous, terrifying thought suddenly crashed into her mind, making her blood run cold. She immediately pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling so slightly she didn't even notice, and dialed the number she knew by heart. But the only thing she heard was the cold, robotic voice on the other end. "We're sorry. The number you have dialed is no longer in service." She tried again and a third time but was met with the same emotionless recording. She sent an iMessage, but it immediately failed to deliver, marked by a red exclamation point. She was finally beginning to understand that when I said we were breaking up, it wasn't just another one of my tantrums. "Chloe!" Liam's cheerful voice called from behind her. He jogged over, reaching for her hand naturally. "There you are. I've been looking all over for you. I need your help with something." Chloe violently shook his hand off, the force of it making him stumble back. The gentle smile on his face froze. "Get away from me!" she snarled, her eyes filled with a frantic irritation and a terror that was completely new to her. She was in no state to deal with Liam right now. Ignoring Liam's stunned and hurt expression, she turned away and started frantically calling every mutual friend we had. But call after call, she got the same result. The boy she had known her whole life, the one she thought would always be there waiting for her, had vanished like a drop of water in the ocean, leaving no trace behind. In a single day, I had personally and completely severed every tie between us. She couldn't even get through to my parents. She called her own parents, only to find out that my entire family had moved away. In that moment, her world came crashing down around her. She had thought this time would be no different. She had deliberately ignored me, deliberately flirted with Liam, even kissed him right in front of me. She wanted to teach me a lesson, to make sure I would never threaten to leave her again. She had never, ever imagined that I would actually go, and that I would leave so completely, so decisively, without leaving her even the slightest chance to win me back. "Chloe," Liam ventured cautiously, looking deeply hurt. "Don't be like this. Ethan's probably just still mad. He'll cool off in a few days." "Shut up," Chloe snapped, her glare terrifyingly dark. "If it wasn't for you," she stopped herself mid-sentence. "If it wasn't for Liam, what? If it wasn't for his perfectly timed phone calls? For all his moments of need?" The problem wasn't Liam. It was her. It was her, repeatedly choosing Liam over my feelings. It was her constantly pushing my boundaries. It was her damnable certainty that I would never, ever leave. It felt like an invisible hand was squeezing her heart, a sharp, suffocating pain. She shoved Liam out of her way and stumbled to the curb, hailing a cab. But once she was inside, she realized she had nowhere to go. She didn't know where my family had moved. She didn't even know what city I was in. The world was a huge place. If I was trying to hide from her, how would she ever find me? The driver drove on aimlessly as she leaned back against the seat and closed her eyes, exhausted. Her phone kept buzzing with messages from Liam, one after another, asking where she was, why she was ignoring him, his words a mixture of concern and accusation. Before, she might have found his concern flattering, but now, they just felt suffocating and annoying. She swiped the notifications away, tempted to just turn her phone off completely, but she couldn't. She was still waiting, hoping a mutual friend might have a clue, waiting for the miracle that she might somehow get in touch with me. Night fell, and the taxi drove aimlessly through the streets of Boston. The vibrant neon lights of the city couldn't penetrate the darkness that had settled in her heart. She scrolled endlessly through our old messages, the ones she used to find so clingy, she couldn't even be bothered to open them. My daily updates, my complaints, my occasional bad moods, they all felt like an impossible luxury now. She went to my Facebook page. My cover photo was gone, replaced by a blank gray space. That cold, empty space was like an uncrossable chasm, separating our two worlds for good. She whispered to herself, "Where in the world are you?" The only answer was the sound of the wind rushing past the window. For the first time in her life, she felt utterly helpless and terrified, as if a vital part of her had been violently torn away. It turned out she was the one who had been left behind. When my plane landed in New York, a light rain was falling. I took a deep breath and tightened my grip on my suitcase handle. My new life was beginning. I completed my registration, got my dorm key, and started unpacking my things. I deliberately avoided my phone. I knew the old group chats from high school were probably still buzzing about Chloe and Liam, but none of that had anything to do with me anymore. I took out my new SIM card, removed the old one, and threw it in the trash without a second thought. The next day, the dorm room came to life as my 3 roommates arrived. They were from all over the country, all different, but friendly. We shared snacks from our hometowns and talked excitedly about what college would be like. I listened with a smile, chiming in here and there. This feeling of being an anonymous face in a new crowd gave me a sense of security I hadn't felt before. The student activities fair was in full swing on the main campus quad. My roommate dragged me through the crowds, but my attention was caught by a quieter booth off to the side. I stopped in front of the banner for the hip-hop dance crew. "Hey, interested in dance?" a gentle voice asked. The speaker was a girl in a simple white blouse, a club ID hanging from a lanyard around her neck. She was organizing sign-up sheets on the table and seemed to have asked without looking up. "We have a really great group. No experience necessary," the girl said, looking up. Her eyes met mine, but she didn't stare. She just gave me a friendly smile and held out a sign-up sheet. "Want to give it a try? We have simple auditions next week, but it's mostly just to meet everyone. Nothing to be nervous about." I hesitated for a second before taking the form. "Thanks. I'm Grace Wallace, from the computer science department," she said with a smile, handing me a pen. "You can fill it out over here." Just then, another club member rushed over. "Grace, I think there's something wrong with the speaker. Can you take a look?" "Yeah, I'm on my way," Grace replied. She gave me an apologetic smile. "Sorry about that. You go ahead and fill that out. Feel free to ask anyone else if you have questions." I filled out the form and handed it to another girl at the table. As I walked away, I glanced back and saw Grace squatting by the speaker, intently checking the cables. On the day of the audition, I waited for my turn by the window. "Ethan," I heard the familiar voice and turned to see Grace walking over from the stairwell. "Hey, Grace," I said, standing up a little straighter. "You're here early," she said, stopping beside me. Her voice was so warm it felt like we were old friends. "Don't be nervous. The instructors are all really chill." I nodded. "Oh, right," she said, as if suddenly remembering something. She pulled a small card from her bag. "This is the QR code for our group chat. You should join so you get updates on practices and events." "Okay, thanks." The audition was just as relaxed as she'd said. I'd been dancing since I was a kid, so a few basic moves were enough to earn appreciative nods from the upperclassmen. When it was over, I was about to head back to my dorm when my phone lit up. It was a new friend request on Instagram from Grace Wallace. I accepted, and a moment later a message popped up. "You were great at the audition. Welcome to the crew." It was followed by a simple smiley face. I held my phone, my thumb hovering over the screen for a moment before I typed back, "Thanks." I put my phone away, pulled my jacket tighter around me, and disappeared into the sparse evening crowd on campus. The streetlights cast my shadow long across the pavement. This was a path I would have to walk alone, slowly but surely. The dance program was more intense than I had imagined. Every morning was spent in the studio, drilling the same tedious but essential fundamentals until my clothes were soaked with sweat. Every afternoon was dedicated to endless choreography rehearsals. My body was exhausted, but my mind felt a strange, fulfilling calm. The exhaustion walled off the memories I didn't want to touch. The dance crew had practiced twice a week. Grace, as the club president, was almost always there. She wasn't a dance major. She was a junior in the notoriously difficult computer science program. She'd often show up to the studio with her black laptop bag slung over her shoulder, looking like she had just rushed over from a lab or the library. She had a maturity and thoughtfulness that seemed beyond her years. She always made sure the studio was booked, checked the sound system beforehand, and even brought disposable cups for people who forgot their water bottles. During breaks, she'd casually share campus news or useful tips. Her kindness was always perfectly measured. She was never overly familiar, and she never once asked about my past or my personal life. One evening after practice, a sudden downpour started outside. I was about to throw my jacket over my head and make a run for my dorm when a large black umbrella silently appeared in front of me. It was Grace. She held up a smaller, collapsible umbrella in her other hand. "I brought two. You should take the big one. It's coming down hard. The small one won't do much." I was a little surprised and instinctively started to refuse. "I'm heading toward the library anyway, so it's on my way," she said, as if sensing my hesitation, giving me an excuse that was easy to accept. "You can just give it back to me at practice tomorrow." "Thanks, Grace," I said, taking the umbrella from her. "No problem," she said with a smile, before opening her own umbrella and walking out into the rain. I walked back to my dorm under the sturdy umbrella, listening to the rain drumming against the fabric. A sense of ease I hadn't felt in a long time washed over me, as cool and refreshing as the rain-washed air. There was no cautious guessing, no hot and cold games, and no suffocating need for control or possession. There was only mutual respect, appropriate concern, and clear boundaries. It made me start to believe that maybe, just maybe, if I could step out of the shadow that had loomed over my entire adolescence, the world could be a wide and open place. I started to get more involved in the dance crew, and I even took an elective she had recommended when I was struggling to choose one. When I saw her around campus, I started to say hello first, and we would sometimes make small talk about the weather or our classes. I still had moments, late at night, when an indescribable emptiness would surface, but the pain was slowly, surely, beginning to fade. Chloe became known around campus for being a loner. After realizing I was truly gone, Chloe seemed to lose all her drive. Liam's texts and calls continued to pour in, lighting up her screen with words she once found flattering but now found suffocating. She would glance at the notifications and then put his contact on mute. So Liam started showing up outside her classes or her dorm, always impeccably dressed, a gentle, pleading smile on his face. Chloe would just give him a cold glance and walk right past him without breaking her stride. "I'm busy. I don't have time. Go by yourself." Her replies were short, leaving no room for argument. The light in Liam's eyes slowly faded, replaced by a look of disbelief, hurt, and resentment. Chloe, however, had no time for his feelings. A frantic, desperate idea began to take root in her mind, quickly consuming her every thought. She had to find me, immediately. Once the idea was there, it was impossible to ignore. After a great deal of effort, she finally found out I was at NYU. Transferring was the fastest, most direct way she could think of to get to me. She started immediately, calling the NYU admissions office again and again, asking about the transfer process and the required documents. She gathered all her awards and transcripts, preparing her application. The news soon reached her parents. On the other end of the line, her father's voice was tight with suppressed rage. "Chloe, what is this nonsense? You think you can just leave Harvard on a whim? Is this some kind of joke to you?" Her mother's voice was choked with tears and confusion. "Chloe, what is going on? Is this about Ethan? Can't you two just talk things out? Why do you have to do something so drastic as transferring?" Chloe stood on her balcony, staring out at the gray sky, her voice hoarse and more stubborn than they had ever heard. "I have to go. A reason? Give me one good reason," her father's voice boomed. A reason? Was she supposed to tell them that she had lost the boy she thought would never leave her, and now she was going to drop everything to get him back? She couldn't say that out loud. It wasn't a good enough reason. "There is no reason. I just have to go to NYU." Her father was so furious he could barely speak. "If you go through with this, you won't see another dime from us." "Fine." Chloe's voice was cold, her tone one of grim finality. "Even if you don't support me, I'm still going." The argument was long and heated. Her parents took turns pleading with her, talking about her future, the family's reputation, the practicalities of it all, their emotional bonds. Chloe just listened in silence, and to every argument, she had only one reply: "I've made up my mind." She even started looking into student loans, preparing for the worst. The pressure from her family was still intense when Liam somehow found out she was planning to transfer to NYU. He confronted her, grabbing her arm hysterically. "Why? Chloe, tell me why. You can't forget him, can you? What's so great about him? He doesn't even want you anymore, and you're still going to chase after him." Chloe wrenched her arm away, her eyes filled with undisguised disgust and ice. "This has nothing to do with you. How can it have nothing to do with me?" Liam yelled. "I love you. I've been by your side all this time. What has Ethan ever done but throw tantrums and threaten to leave?" "Shut up." Chloe cut him off sharply. "Liam, listen to me. There has never been, and there will never be, anything between us. Stop wasting your time on me." Her words hit him like a physical blow. He stood frozen, his face ashen, his lips trembling, unable to speak. No obstacle, no argument, could sway her from her decision. The transfer process was difficult and slow, but she pushed through. When she finally held the acceptance letter from NYU and boarded the flight to New York, she leaned against the window with no sentimentality for what she was leaving behind, only a desperate, urgent emptiness. She had no interest in the new campus. The moment she arrived, she started frantically trying to find me, asking about the dance program schedule, the studios, which dorm I might be in. She searched for any possible clue like a woman possessed. Finally, one evening, she heard that the dance crew was having a joint practice with another club. She practically ran to the studio. The studio had large windows, and warm, bright light spilled out from them. Through the glass, she saw him instantly, the boy whose image was etched into her very soul. I was standing with my head tilted slightly, listening to someone next to me. It was Grace. She handed me one of the 2 water bottles she was holding, smiling as she spoke. As I listened to her, a small, natural smile formed on my lips. It was a look of ease that Chloe hadn't seen on my face in a very long time. Chloe's heart clenched, a painful, aching feeling. A powerful impulse drove her to throw open the studio door. Ethan, her voice shattered the calm atmosphere in the room. All eyes turned to the intruder. I turned at the sound of my name, and the moment I saw her, the faint, genuine smile on my face disappeared completely. My eyes rested on her for less than a second before I looked away, my face a blank mask. Without a word to Grace, I grabbed my bag and walked straight out the other door. No questions, no anger, no hurt, just cold, complete dismissal. Chloe stood frozen in the doorway, her hand still half raised. All the words she had prepared caught in her throat. She watched my retreating back, then looked over at Grace, who was now watching her with a calm, appraising expression. A brutal realization washed over her like ice water, chilling her to the bone. Without her, I was doing just fine. I was even doing better. And there was someone new, someone wonderful in my world now. The person who could make me smile like that was no longer her. Chloe's arrival was like a boulder dropped into a calm pond. She was everywhere. In the morning, she would wait outside my first class with a warm bag from my favorite bakery. Ethan, I know you haven't eaten breakfast. In the afternoon, she would wait outside the dance studio with a huge bouquet of white roses, drawing stares from everyone who passed. I remember you said you liked white roses best. In the evening, she would step out from the shadows on the path back to my dorm, blocking my way. Her eyes were bloodshot, and her voice was hoarse from repeating the same words over and over. Can we please talk? Just for 5 minutes? I know I was wrong. My reaction was always the same. I would never look at her for more than a second, and I would walk right past whatever gift she was holding out. If she tried to block my path, I would say calmly, I don't want it. Please move. You're bothering me. Once, when she tried to grab my wrist in front of a crowd of people, I shook her off forcefully. My voice wasn't loud, but it was clear enough for everyone whispering around us to hear. Miss Anderson, we don't know each other well. Please stop doing these things. It's making me uncomfortable. The words were like needles of ice, piercing straight through Chloe's heart. Rumors began to spread across campus like wildfire, and I was constantly followed by curious, speculative stares. In response, I just threw myself deeper into my classes and dance, burying myself in work, as if the noise couldn't reach me as long as I kept moving. And through all of this suffocating drama, Grace became a silent but steady shield. She never asked a single question about Chloe. She would just happen to be riding her bike past when Chloe cornered me on the way back to my dorm, leaving me pale and shaking. Ethan, she'd call out, stopping a few feet away with one foot on the ground. Her voice was casual. I was just looking for you. The marketing committee needs the raw photos from our last event, like yesterday. Can you come with me now? Her voice instantly broke the tense standoff. I nodded immediately and hurried over to her. In the dining hall, Chloe ignored the stares and sat down directly across from me. I put down my fork, ready to leave. Grace and a few other people from the crew walked over with their trays. Is this seat taken? Grace asked with a smile, gesturing to the empty chair beside me. She sat down, creating a natural barrier between me and Chloe, then immediately turned to her friends to talk about a recent coding competition, effortlessly diffusing my awkwardness and completely ignoring Chloe's thunderous expression. Each of these perfectly timed interventions was like pouring gasoline on the fire of Chloe's jealousy. She became even more relentless. She followed me more closely, showed up more often, brought more expensive gifts, her apologies growing more and more dramatic. She even started digging into Grace's background. Ethan, stay away from her. Do you even know who she is? What right does she have? Does our history mean less than someone you've known for a few months? Are you falling for her? Answer me. To her increasingly frantic questions and pleas, my only response was an ever colder refusal. My heart felt like it had turned to stone. No matter how hysterical she got, no matter how much she swallowed her pride and begged, nothing she did could move me anymore. Chloe stood under a tree, watching as I walked away with Grace without a moment's hesitation, not even sparing her a sideways glance. The rumors swirled around me, but I did my best to ignore them and focus all my energy on dance. But some things you just can't avoid. The dining hall was packed and noisy. I had just sat down with my roommate when an angry voice cut through the din. Ethan, you're a real piece of work. Every head in the room turned. Liam was standing in the middle of the dining hall, his face a mask of pure jealousy and scorn. He stormed over to my table, jabbing his finger in my face. Couldn't win Chloe back, so you decided to disappear? Play the victim, act all high and mighty, hiding all the way out here? You think that's going to make her miss you? His voice was shrill with anger, every word dripping with venom. What else are you good for besides playing these pathetic games? You're the one who broke up with her. Now that she's followed you here, you must be feeling pretty pleased with yourself. Huh. My knuckles turned white around my fork, but I kept my face blank. The whispers around us grew louder, and I could feel dozens of curious, probing, and even malicious eyes on me. This is all just a show, isn't it? Liam's voice grew louder when I didn't respond. I'm telling you, don't even bother. You're nothing but… Excuse me. A calm but firm voice cut through Liam's tirade. Grace had walked over at some point. She subtly stepped in front of me, shielding me from Liam's aggressive stare. Her expression was as gentle as always, but her eyes were calm and steady, with an unshakable strength. First of all, this is a public space. Please be mindful of your behavior. You are disturbing everyone else who is trying to eat, Grace said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried clearly over the noise of the room. Secondly, your baseless accusations and personal attacks constitute public harassment, and according to the Student Code of Conduct, we have the right to ask you to leave immediately. She paused, her eyes sweeping over Liam's furious, distorted face before landing on a campus security officer who was approaching. She gave the officer a slight nod, and finally, her voice was still even, but with a hard edge I'd never heard before. Whatever you may think you know, you have no right to judge Ethan's choices. The security officer immediately stepped forward. Liam stared in disbelief at the girl who had appeared out of nowhere, trembling with rage. Who the hell are you? This is between him and me. It's none of your business. Are you sleeping with him or something? Who I am is irrelevant. Grace cut in smoothly, her voice perfectly calm. This is about what is right and what is wrong. Please leave. I looked up at Grace's back, and a sudden, sharp stinging filled my eyes, which I quickly forced back down. Just then, another figure pushed through the crowd and rushed forward. It was Chloe. She had clearly been running. Her face was paler and more strained than I had ever seen it. She first glanced at Liam, who was being held back by security, his face livid. Then her eyes shot to me, standing behind Grace. Finally, her gaze locked onto Grace's protective back, and a storm of complex emotions, anger, humiliation, jealousy, churned in her eyes. Liam, she practically snarled, grabbing his arm so tightly he cried out, haven't you caused enough trouble? Who told you to come here? Chloe, Liam looked at her as if she were his savior, his eyes instantly welling with tears as he tried to explain. Shut up. Chloe cut him off. Her glare was terrifyingly cold. I made it perfectly clear to you. There is nothing between us. My life is none of your business. Now get off this campus and never show your face in front of me, or him, ever again. She pointed at me, her tone absolute. Stung by the undisguised loathing in her eyes, the color drained from Liam's face. He stood there, lips trembling, unable to speak, as the security officer led him, dazed, out of the dining hall. The center of the drama was suddenly empty. Chloe stood where she was, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She had dealt with Liam. She had drawn a clear line in front of everyone. She looked at me, her mouth opening as if to explain, to apologize, to beg for some sign of forgiveness. She must have thought she'd finally done the right thing. She had protected me. She had gotten rid of the person who was hurting me. All eyes were on me, waiting for my reaction, but I just stood up quietly. I didn't even look at Chloe, acting as if her dramatic defense and her desperate, waiting gaze had nothing to do with me. I just turned to Grace. Thank you, Grace. Let's go. Chloe's outstretched hand froze in midair, all her unspoken words dying in her throat. A crushing wave of despair and coldness slammed into her, extinguishing the last, futile flicker of hope. But the surface calm didn't last long. Liam's obsessive streak wasn't broken by the public humiliation. Instead, it twisted into something more sinister. He stopped making public scenes and started stalking her instead. He learned her class schedule. He would be waiting for her like a ghost outside her lecture halls, the library, even her dorm. He didn't yell anymore. He would just stare at her with those wounded, accusatory eyes, asking the same questions over and over. Chloe, why are you treating me like this? You promised you'd look out for me. Did you forget? I'm not leaving until you give me an explanation. This silent, constant harassment was even more unnerving than his public outbursts. Chloe's patience was long gone. She would ignore him and walk faster, but he would always manage to appear in her path again. Chloe and her roommate got back to their dorm after a run. The moment they opened the door, they were hit with an unfamiliar scent. Liam was sitting at her desk, his fingers idly tracing the covers of her open textbooks. Her roommates exchanged uncomfortable, angry glances. The atmosphere in the room was tense and awkward. "Chloe, what is?" one of her roommates started to say, her voice tight with annoyance. Chloe's face became a thundercloud. Without a word, she strode forward, grabbed Liam's wrist, and in the stunned silence of the room, violently dragged him out of the dorm, down the stairs, and straight toward the campus gate. She didn't stop until she had dragged him into a secluded alley just off campus, where she finally threw his hand off. Liam rubbed his red wrist. "Chloe, what the hell? You have no right to treat me like this." "No right?" Chloe finally spoke, her voice like ice. "Liam, I should be asking you that. What right do you have to follow me everywhere? To harass me? To bother my roommates? Who do you think you are? I just want an answer. I want you to be the way you were before." Liam screamed. "This is all because of Ethan, isn't it? If he wasn't in the picture, even if he wasn't, it would never be you." Chloe cut him off, shattering his delusions without mercy. "The only reason I was ever nice to you was because our dean asked me to. I was being stupid and I ignored what was really important and I let you get the wrong idea. But let me be perfectly clear now. There is nothing between us. There never was, there isn't now, and there never will be." The undisguised disgust and finality in her eyes made him flinch. His face flushed with shame and anger. "How can you say that? You were the one who—" "I was the one who what?" Chloe took a step closer, her voice low and menacing. "Liam, I have my limits. If you continue this, if you keep following me, or harassing anyone I know." She paused, her icy gaze sweeping over his frozen face, her tone a final, undeniable threat. "I will have no problem compiling a list of everything you've done. Every single thing. How you accidentally spilled juice on yourself to wear my shirt. How you happened to fall down the stairs. Every lie you told Ethan behind his back. I will write it all down and send it to the school newspaper, to every professor we've ever had, and to the dean of your department. And then we'll see what happens to your scholarship applications, your academic awards, and your precious grad school recommendations." The color drained completely from Liam's face. His lips trembled, and for the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. He knew better than anyone that she meant every word. All his clever little schemes were nothing in the face of her absolute, scorched-earth threat. If she exposed him, the perfect image he had so carefully crafted would be destroyed, and his future would be ruined. "Chloe, you can't," he stammered, his voice shaking. "I can," Chloe said, her voice like steel, her eyes unwavering. "So take your pathetic games and get out of my sight. If I ever see you again, you will regret it." She didn't wait for a reply. Without another glance at his ashen face and trembling body, she turned and walked away, leaving him alone in the cold, empty alley. Liam stood frozen. After a long moment, as if all the strength had been sucked out of him, he slowly sank to the ground and buried his face in his hands. He knew he had lost, completely. Her words had destroyed any hope he had left. He could live with the humiliation, but he couldn't live with a ruined future. Finally, he staggered to his feet and stumbled out of the alley, a pathetic and defeated figure. Chloe stood in the rain outside my dorm, water dripping from her hair and soaking her shoulders. She had lost count of how many times she had stood there, waiting in vain. Every time I appeared, I would walk right past her without even a sideways glance. Rejection after rejection, a wall of ice every time. At first, she had been anxious, resentful, angry. But then, during countless sleepless nights, she began to replay the past in her mind. She remembered the time Liam posted on Facebook that he was feeling down, and she had immediately dropped an argument with me to talk to him on the phone all night. She remembered sneaking off campus to buy Liam stomach medicine, and then remembered the time I had a stomachache and she had just casually told me to drink some hot water. She remembered the look on my face at the party when she had so naturally given the best piece of watermelon to Liam. And she remembered standing by the pond, not even looking at me as I struggled in the water, and saying coldly, "Whether he lives or dies has nothing to do with me." Every memory was painfully, cruelly clear. She had taken my love for granted, squandered my patience, and pushed my boundaries again and again. She had always thought I was the one who couldn't leave her. Turned out it was the other way around. Her anger and resentment were slowly consumed by an endless, overwhelming regret. She grew quiet. The confident, vibrant energy she once had was gone, replaced by a quiet, persistent sadness in her eyes. She stopped waiting for me outside my classes or the studio. She stopped leaving gifts I would never acknowledge. She bought a thick stack of stationery, and every night, after her roommate was asleep, she would sit at her desk and write. She would carefully fold the letters and leave them in my mailbox, and signed. but she knew I would recognize her handwriting. One letter, then two, then three. She watched from a distance as I went to my mailbox. I took out the thick stack of envelopes, and without even opening them, dropped them into the nearby trash can. The motion was fluid, without a moment's hesitation, as if I were throwing away a piece of junk mail, not the heartfelt confessions of the person I once loved. Chloe watched from the shadows of a nearby tree, and her heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice, the pain so intense she almost doubled over. The last, faint flicker of hope was gone. She finally understood that some wounds, once they are made, can never truly heal. Meanwhile, my life was slowly returning to a state of calm, but only I knew that a part of my heart was still frozen solid. I was instinctively wary of any emotional connection that got too close. Grace continued to respect my boundaries. She never tried to manufacture moments for us to be alone, and she never pried into my past. One night, I stayed late at the studio practicing by myself. When I finally left, I discovered it was pouring rain. I was staring out at the downpour, wondering what to do, when that familiar black umbrella appeared silently beside me. "Looks like this umbrella and you are destined to be friends," Grace said with a smile. "Come on, the dining hall is closed. I know a great little noodle shop just off campus. Want to go?" We didn't talk much, just ate our food in comfortable silence. In the warm, relaxed atmosphere of the little shop, I felt the tension in my shoulders begin to ease. I would occasionally look up and watch her as she ate, her profile calm and serene. I knew Grace was a wonderful person, but I wasn't ready to give her anything more. The ice around my heart was still too thick. It would take more time and more warmth for it to melt. And from a distance, Chloe saw it all. She watched the moments of ease that crossed my face when I was with Grace, and though her heart still twisted with a sharp pain, she no longer had the courage to interfere. She just watched from a distance. The annual NYU dance competition was always a huge event. The auditorium was packed. I was performing a modern solo piece I had choreographed, called Metamorphosis. The house lights went down, leaving a single, stark spotlight on the center of the stage. I was dressed all in black, my movements powerful but restrained, flowing with the slow build of the music. As the music reached its crescendo, my movements exploded with energy, a series of powerful leaps and turns, ending in a final, difficult, breathtaking pose. The lights came up, and after a moment of stunned silence, the auditorium erupted in thunderous applause. Breathing heavily, I stood and bowed to the audience. In the front row, Grace was applauding enthusiastically, her eyes shining with undisguised admiration. And in the shadows at the very back of the auditorium, another figure slipped away unnoticed. Chloe leaned against the cold back wall, watching me shine on the stage. The applause washed over me in waves. She saw the confidence and peace in my eyes. She saw the open admiration in Grace's gaze as she looked at me. A huge, belated understanding washed over her like ice water. She knew that the boy whose world once revolved around her was gone, and she had been the one to lose him. This wasn't a temporary fight. This wasn't something she could fix with an apology. This was a real, permanent loss. She would never stand by my side again. She would never be the reason for my smile again. A heavy, crushing despair settled over her. She didn't try to approach me. Amidst the applause, she silently turned and slipped out of the auditorium. The results of the competition were no surprise. My piece, Metamorphosis, won first place. A few days later, a long, carefully wrapped package arrived for me. It was anonymous with only a small, typed card attached. I opened it. Inside was a vinyl record of the classic ballet Giselle, a rare pressing that had been out of print for years. I remembered mentioning once, in a casual conversation at a crew meeting, how much I wished I could find this specific recording. I held the heavy record in my hands and felt a gentle stirring in my chest. I thought of Grace almost immediately. That evening, after practice, as people were leaving, I walked over to Grace. "Hey," I said quietly, "thank you. I love the record." Grace looked up, a knowing look in her eyes. "I'm glad you like it, and congratulations on your win. You really deserved it." She looked at me, her gaze clear and direct. I could see her concern, her admiration, and maybe something more, something unspoken. But she always held back, staying carefully on her side of the line, leaving the choice entirely up to me. I could feel her sincerity, and I could feel something in my own heart beginning to stir. But I still needed time, so I just said again, quietly, "Really, thank you." Grace didn't look disappointed or upset. She just nodded with understanding. "You're welcome. Get home safe tonight." She stood and watched me go. I walked away holding the gift, and I felt a small piece of the ice in my heart begin to melt, bringing with it a tentative warmth and a confusing flutter of emotion. Chloe stood under the familiar tree outside my dorm, staring stubbornly up at my lighted window. She knew I was in there. Her arms and legs grew numb with cold, but she could still feel the dull, throbbing ache in her chest. She remembered all the times in the past she had waited like this, after making me angry. Back then, no matter how angry I was, I would always give in. I would come downstairs, my eyes red, and pull her into a tight hug. But not this time. She was soaked through, shivering uncontrollably from the cold. An unnatural flush was creeping up her cheeks, and her head felt dizzy. Finally, the door to the building opened. But it wasn't me who came out. It was my roommate. He looked at the miserable sight of Chloe standing there, sighed, and held a dry umbrella over her head. "Chloe, you should go home," my roommate said, his voice full of pity. "Ethan asked me to tell you to please stop bothering him." In that moment, the cold rain felt like it was scalding her skin. Chloe staggered back as if she'd been struck. She understood. I was really, truly done with her. The Ethan who would have ached to see her standing in the rain, the Ethan who would have forgiven her for the smallest kindness, was long gone, killed by her cruelty and her choices. She took the umbrella but didn't open it. She just turned and stumbled away into the night. She lay in her dorm for 2 days, drifting in and out of a feverish haze, memories of our past playing on a loop in her mind, always ending with the image of my cold, empty eyes looking at her as if she were a stranger. After she recovered, Chloe seemed like a different person. Her sharp, vibrant energy was gone, replaced by a dead, still calm. She stopped asking about me. She stopped showing up in places she thought I might be. She made an appointment with the university's counseling services. She started seeing a therapist every week. In that quiet office, for the first time, she stopped running. She began the difficult, clumsy work of dissecting her own actions, of facing the pain she had caused me, of confronting her own flaws and her own arrogant assumptions. The NYU campus wasn't huge, but it wasn't small either. Occasionally, we would still pass each other by. At the crowded entrance to the dining hall, between the stacks in the library, on the long, tree-lined walk between classes. Sometimes she would see me first. I'd be walking with Grace or my roommates, maybe smiling at something they said. She told her therapist that every time she saw me smile, she felt a sharp pain in her chest, but she would just look away and walk faster in the other direction. Sometimes I would see her first. My eyes would pass over her without stopping, and I would continue my conversation with whoever I was with, walking away as if she wasn't there. At the end of the semester, the university announced the list of students for the study abroad program. Chloe looked at the name of a university on the list, in a country on the other side of the ocean. A place with no memories of me, no drama with Liam. A place where she could truly start over. She stood in front of the bulletin board for a long time. Finally, she took out her phone, took a picture of the announcement, and walked toward the study abroad office. Her steps were slow, but steady and determined. The news that Chloe was leaving NYU spread across campus faster than anyone would have expected. Within a day or two, it was the talk of the campus forums, and the news inevitably reached the dance department. The chatter stopped the moment I walked into the studio. A few people shot me cautious, probing, and faintly sympathetic looks. My stride faltered for a fraction of a second, but then I walked to my spot and sat down, my face impassive. My fingers tightened slightly, creasing the edge of the page of the book I was holding. My daily routine didn't change, but sometimes, when I walked down a certain tree-lined path, I would find myself glancing at a familiar corner, only to find it empty. Another joint practice ended, and people started packing up to leave. I hung back a little, and the studio slowly emptied out until it was just me and Grace, who was doing a final check of the windows and doors. "Okay, let's go," Grace said, locking the last window and turning to me. We walked side by side down the campus path. After a moment of comfortable silence, Grace spoke, her voice calm but with a new, serious tone. "Ethan." I looked over at her. She stopped walking. "There's something I think I should tell you." She paused, as if choosing her words carefully. "I have feelings for you that are more than just friendly." My heart skipped a beat, and my hand tightened on the strap of my backpack. I opened my mouth, but I didn't know what to say. But before I could form a coherent thought, she continued. "I'm not telling you this because I expect an answer right away, and I'm definitely not trying to pressure you. I just believe that being honest about my feelings is the most respectful thing to do, for both you and for me." She looked into my slightly stunned eyes, her voice gentle but firm. "I know you've been through a lot, and you might need time to heal and figure things out. That's completely okay. I'm only telling you this because I don't want to hide it from you. Whatever your answer is, and however long it takes you to find it, we can just keep being friends like we are now. Nothing has to change. There's no pressure. She didn't push. She didn't test me. She just laid her sincere, restrained feelings out in the open, and then handed the choice, completely and without reservation, back to me. All the awkwardness, pressure, and even resistance I might have felt vanished in the face of her clear, respectful words. I looked at the girl in front of me, the one who always showed up at just the right moment, who had defended me, who had cared for me from a safe distance, and who was now giving me all the power in the situation. A complex mix of gratitude, surprise, and relief washed over me. I was quiet for a moment. When I spoke, my voice was a little hoarse, but just as sincere as hers. Grace, thank you. Thank you for being so honest, and thank you for respecting me. I do need some more time. I understand, she said, a gentle smile on her lips. Her eyes were clear, with no trace of disappointment or annoyance. Take all the time you need. We can just be like we were before, okay? Okay, I nodded, and the tension I hadn't even realized I was holding in my shoulders finally released. For the rest of the walk, we fell back into easy conversation, talking about final exams and plans for the crew next semester. The atmosphere was as comfortable as it had always been, but something had shifted. A barrier had been gently broken, but what came through wasn't awkwardness, but warmth. It cleared the air between us and gave her quiet companionship a name, something definite and reassuring. When we got to my dorm, Grace stopped. Get some rest. You too, I said with a small smile and turned to go inside. Back in my room, I leaned against the door and placed a hand over my heart. Its rhythm was steady and strong. The heavy, suffocating weight of the past was finally, truly starting to lift. And a new feeling, something bright and full of respect, was gently knocking at the door. In the dance crew, I had grown from a new face into a core member of the team. Grace started giving me more responsibility for planning and organizing, and I always handled it meticulously, coming up with new, practical ideas that earned the trust and respect of the other members. A genuine confidence, born from being valued for my own abilities, began to replace the old feeling of worthlessness I'd had when I wasn't the center of someone else's attention. My friendship with Grace continued as it was, with the same comfortable boundaries, but something was quietly shifting between us. I started to let my guard down with her, just a little, showing her small flashes of my real feelings. My frustration after a bad rehearsal, my complaints about a difficult paper, even just my annoyance with the endless New York rain. Every time, Grace would listen quietly, offering either a logical perspective or gentle reassurance, always perfectly, without ever overstepping. That safe, comfortable dynamic was like a gentle tide, slowly washing away at the walls I had built around my heart. The warmth of my family was my strongest safe harbor. My parents' business in New York was thriving, and they had made our new house a warm and comfortable home. Every weekend I didn't have practice, I went home. The table was always laden with all my favorite foods. My parents never asked about my personal life. They just wanted to know if my classes were going well, if I was getting enough sleep, if I needed any money. I knew that no matter what happened, there would always be a light on for me at home, and two pairs of arms waiting to welcome me. At the end of the semester, the Tisch School of the Arts held its annual student showcase. A piece I had choreographed and was the lead dancer in Chasing Light was chosen to be the final performance of the night. On the night of the show, the theater was sold out. In the audience, my parents sat holding hands, their eyes shining with proud, happy tears. Grace sat beside them, watching me on stage with a quiet, clear smile on her face. The performance was a huge success. At the awards ceremony that followed, I was chosen to give a speech on behalf of the recipients. I stood in the spotlight, dressed in a simple t-shirt, my posture tall, my gaze clear and steady as I looked out at the crowd. Thank you, everyone. This award isn't just a recognition of past work. It's a new beginning. I used to think that growing up meant struggling under the weight of the past. But being here has taught me another way to grow. It's about letting go of that weight and focusing on the path ahead. I lifted my chin slightly, a bright, genuine smile spreading across my face. There will be challenges ahead, I'm sure, but there will be even more to look forward to, and I'm ready for it. The audience broke into long, enthusiastic applause. My parents wiped tears of joy from their eyes. Grace's applause was steady and strong, her eyes never leaving me as I stood, shining on the stage. The scars from the past might not have vanished completely, but they were no longer chains holding me down. They had become a part of me, a source of my strength. My future was unfolding before me, bright and clear, and it was mine to create. On the other side of the Atlantic, Chloe clutched her heavy textbooks to her chest, pulling her coat tighter as she hurried across the empty plaza in front of the library. Life in a foreign country felt like it was in slow motion with the sound turned off. Without the frantic chasing and manufactured encounters, the days stretched on, long and empty. She got used to spending her days in the library until it closed, living on coffee and cold sandwiches. She continued with her therapy. In that quiet room, she learned to stop arming herself with anger and denial. She began the clumsy, painful work of examining the moments that had led to her loss. She remembered the disappointment in my eyes, again and again. She remembered how she had taken me for granted. She remembered her ridiculous, arrogant certainty that I would never leave. The pain was still sharp, but she was learning to live with it instead of burying it. And in that constant, dull ache, she was slowly, painfully, reshaping her understanding of love and responsibility. Growing up was a lonely journey. She stumbled, but she never turned back. For the first month or two, Liam's texts and international calls came frequently. His tone shifted from hurt complaints to resentful questions, and finally to weary pleading. "Chloe, when are you coming back? What's so great over there? Did you meet someone else? Is there really no chance for us?" Chloe's replies went from short and cold to non-existent. She stopped responding altogether. She had no emotion left for him. Not love, not hate, not even annoyance. She didn't want to waste another second of her life on him. His persistence finally died out, extinguished by her complete and total silence. His last text came late one night. It was only 2 words. "I get it." After that, there was only silence. The name that had once caused such a storm between us finally disappeared, sinking without a ripple. Her world was finally, completely quiet. And on the other side of the world, on a perfectly ordinary evening, Grace and I were walking out of the library as the setting sun cast our shadows long on the pavement. Grace suddenly slowed her pace and turned to look at me, her expression gentle and serious. "Ethan," she said. I stopped and met her gaze. The evening light caught in her hair, framing her face in a warm, golden glow. "I told you before that I would wait until you were ready. So I want to ask you now, are you ready to let me be by your side, as your girlfriend?" I looked at her. I thought of all the times she had been there for me, of her unwavering respect for my boundaries, of her quiet support, and of the clear, hopeful light in her eyes. I had lost the courage to believe in love, but she, with her time and her actions, had helped me piece that courage back together, little by little. A slow smile spread across my lips, a gentle warmth filling my eyes. "Yeah," I said softly, my voice filled with a lightness and certainty I hadn't felt in a long, long time. A look of happy surprise lit up Grace's eyes. She gently reached out and took my hand. We didn't say anything else. We just smiled at each other, and our fingers naturally interlaced as we continued walking down the path, bathed in the golden light of the sunset. Behind us, the past was finally laid to rest, and ahead of us, a new path stretched out, one filled with hope that we would walk together.